Hello, my name is Taya Graham, and welcome to the Police Accountability Report. As I always make clear, this show has a single purpose, holding the politically powerful institution of policing accountable. And to do so, we don't just focus on the bad behavior of individual cops. Instead, we examine the system that makes bad policing possible. And today, we're going to do so by striking back at one of the key enablers of bad policing, Copaganda. That's right, the movies and popular culture that tout police as underpaid heroes who dutifully enforce the law, which is sometimes true, but sometimes is not. But we're going to do so by using a piece of popular culture that has long been forgotten, but actually might be the best antidote to Copaganda we have ever seen. It's a movie called Copland, and we're going to break down how this story of police corruption and mayhem is actually the most accurate and telling depiction of law enforcement in the history of Hollywood. But before we get started, I want you watching to know that if you have evidence of police misconduct, please email it to us privately at par@therealnews.com. And please like, share, and comment on our videos. You know I read your comments and that I appreciate them. And of course, you can always reach out to me directly at Tejas Baltimore on Facebook or Twitter. And of course, there's a Patreon donate link pinned in the comments below, and we do have some extras for our PAR family. Okay, we've gotten that all out of the way. Now, as we've discussed before on this show, American culture is awash in what we call Copaganda, movies and TV series that paint police not just as saviors of our democracy, but literally the human dividing line between good and evil. And that type of mythos has become more extreme as policing has expanded its grip on our country. Let's remember, American taxpayers fund police to the tune of $120 billion per year, a number that continues to grow. Meanwhile, even as the funding for police has increased in 2020, homicides have shot up by 30%. My point is that if police was really the solution to crime and violence, then all the spending we devote to it should produce better results. And that's where Copaganda comes in. Because if you can't deliver the basic underlying premise on which the entire institution is based, then you have to use other means to keep the dollars flowing. I mean, let's remember that many of the stories we cover on this show are illustrative of the fact that police spend far more time writing bogus tickets and making unnecessary car stops than they do investigating serious crimes. And let's not forget that we have reported on time and time again how police abuse their powers even when they are clearly enumerated laws that are supposed to limit what they can do, but often don't. So, as the godfather of modern propaganda and advertising, Edward Bernays explained, the best way to convince people to accept bad policy is to use clever techniques to appeal to their emotions and make the worst appear the better cause. And no industry has done a better job at this task for American law enforcement than our prodigious American culture industry. I mean, it's not just how these shows portray cops, always honest, hardworking upholders of civilization. It's also how many darn cop shows there are. I mean, it's almost like no story can be told about us unless it's through the eyes of a cop. Take, for example, a show produced in our hometown in Baltimore called The Wire. The Wire is often touted as an auteur's honest take on the intersection of poverty, politics, and policing, a riveting deep dive into the realities of a crumbling urban core. But don't you think it's odd that the entire narrative of the series is told through the eyes of police? I mean, isn't it strange that the primary characters of the show who explore urban decay have a badge and a gun? I mean, it seems a little strange that police have become the primary narrator of our lives. But of course, that's why in this show, we're going to review a movie that actually gets policing right. A film that has been relegated to the dustbin of history, but actually depicts the true imperative of contemporary policing better than any piece of popular culture we know of. It's called Copland, a movie starring Sylvester Stallone, who plays a small-town New Jersey sheriff in a town that is quite literally owned by the cops, with a stellar cast, including Robert De Niro, Ray Liotta, Harvey Keitel, Michael Rappaport, and Robert Patrick. It was released in 1996, and it opened to mixed reviews and meager box office success. But, like many pieces of great art, it has gotten better with age and become more relevant now than ever when it first hit theaters more than 25 years ago. That's because the film does something many films do not, which is to reveal through expert storytelling the underlying forces that drive the problematic, law enforcement industrial complex we live with today. And the film accomplishes this goal, not by proselytizing, but instead reveals these truisms through complex characters, expert acting, and a riveting narrative. And to show you exactly how this film accomplishes this, and also contradicts the aforementioned Copaganda, I'm joined by my reporting partner, Stephen Janis. Stephen, thank you so much for joining me. Stephen? Hold on. I think we're having a technical problem. But you know, Stephen does spend an awful lot of time outside, and some people are even concerned that we just leave him out there. So to be nice for the holiday season, just this once, I'm going to go get him.
Taya, thank you for Taya? Taya, can you hear me?
Hey, Stephen.
Huh?
Surprise.
What?
Just this once.
What are you doing here?
You can come inside.
You're going to let me? I really feel much more comfortable being outside.
Look, there have been some requests from our kind viewers who are a little bit worried about you, and they said you should come inside. Wow. Just this once for the holidays.
All right, great. I guess I'll do it. Sure, why not?
All right.
I'll see you guys later.
Come on in.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, where do I go?
Come on over.
Okay. You want me to sit here?
Right here.
All right, this is just weird. I'm just sorry. I'm just not used to being inside.
I know.
I know it seems a little strange, but I spent the past year outside. So
that's true.
Being inside is a little weird.
I don't want him to get used to it. This is a one-time deal.
Okay.
So let's set the scene for Copland. Sylvester Stallone is the sheriff of a small town in Garrison, New Jersey, just over the George Washington Bridge. And let's listen to Robert De Niro, who plays Mo Tilden, talk a little bit about what Copland is.
Back in the 70s, every cop wanted out of the city. But the only cops allowed to live outside New York were transit cops, because the transit authority was also run by Jersey and Connecticut. So these guys I knew at the 3-7, they started pulling overtime at subway stations and got the city to declare them auxiliary transit cops. They bought some land in Jersey, got some cheap loans from people they knew. They made themselves a place
where the shit couldn't touch them.
So there's this arrangement that's alluded to, but is not fully discussed, that gives us the idea that perhaps there's something more sinister behind Copland, right?
Right, because what basically Mo Tillman tells us, or what we learn later on, is that this town was sort of bought and paid for by the mob, so that those cops that got out of New York would allow them to run drugs through that neighborhood, which I assume is in the Bronx. But nevertheless, the point is that there's a separation between the police and the community, and not only do the police leave the community, but they also use the community to finance their little suburban paradise and utopia. So it sets up a very interesting premise. We don't know this at first, but there's a kind of alluded to it. They got themselves out, they were working as transit cops. They kind of, gamed the system, but also separated themselves from the community that they were supposed to serve, which is, I think, a big, big theme in American policing right now.
Absolutely. Now, one of the things that is so extraordinary about this movie is how many times police officers actually commit crimes during this movie. So we have our sheriff, our hero, Freddie Heflin, who one of the first acts we see him do is he's in a bar playing pinball. He runs out of quarters, so he breaks into a parking meter to help himself, right?
Yeah, no, it's an extraordinary sort of casual event, and Ray Liotta, who's one of his friends, is watching him and kind of chuckling when really he's committing, misconduct in office. Clearly, right? Clearly, you can't, as a cop, just help yourself to a parking meter. But it kind of sets the tone for the movie because it says, you know what? There's different rules for us. If I need quarters for my pinball machine, I'll just go into a parking meter. I think it's a really important. It's subtle, it's small, but at the same time, it speaks volumes about how Copland is run and how laws are one for cops and one for everybody else.
Okay, so a big scene that moves the movie forward is when Michael Rappaport, who plays the character Superboy, is driving along, and he may have actually been intoxicated during this drive, but we don't know for certain. But he's driving along, and he ends up in a hit-and-run situation with two other gentlemen in a car. He ends up shooting those two unarmed young men. Let's take a quick look at what happens. So, Stephen, what's happening here and why is it so important?
Well, this is really the conflict that sets up everything that cascades from it. And, when Superboy car is hit, he thinks that these young men are shooting at him, but all they have is like a tire iron. So then the scene that evolves on the bridge is really, really illustrative, because after he shoots and kills these guys, it's like the sort of mechanisms of policing all jump into action. And you have the union rep. Both union reps are on the bridge, including Harvey Keitel, who immediately says, oh, I've got a gun in the trunk, and we'll plant the gun. One of the cop friends of Superboy plants the gun, and then all chaos breaks out. Absolutely. So what's interesting is you see how police protect themselves. First of all, you can't just shoot someone from running away from you. Even if they hit your car, get their license plate. But he shoots him. After he kills him, then they go into another cover-up. Rather than investigating this properly, they literally start a cascade cover-up where, as you know, Superboy jumps off the bridge.
Now, what I thought was really interesting is that when Superboy finds out that he has killed 2 young men, the first thing he says is, they're going to take my shield.
Hey, give that back!
Take my fucking shield away from me.
Oh my God, Leo! Leo, Jesus! He jumped! Oh my God! Jumped!
Why do you think that is so important? I think this says so much that his first thought was not for the young men, but for his badge, his gun, and his authority.
Well, it's like the shield is like a barrier, right? It's like literally a shield. It's like a social shield. It says, I am not going to be, I can't be part of the regular population where I have to follow the rules of everybody else. I can't just be a normal citizen of this city. I got my shield, and I think that's really great that you brought that up, because it's a very interesting word. He didn't say I'm going to lose my job, right, or I'm going to go to jail. I'm going to lose my shield, and I think that's a metaphor, an effective metaphor for what it means to be a cop in Copland and in New York in this movie.
So one of the things that we promised at the beginning of this is that we were going to talk about how Copaganda works and the strange way that crime, or what our idea of crime is normalized and set by law enforcement officers. Stephen, maybe you can talk a little bit about this effect.
Well, one of the things really interesting is that when you start getting into the movie, right, and you see Superboy jump and you see Sylvester Stallone break into the, parking meter, and you see the gun pulled out and planted, and you see crime after crime after crime, and you start realizing that in this world of policing, that's just the way things are. They're not cognizant. It's not like someone says, oh, don't plant that gun, that's a crime, or someone says, hey, Freddie Heflin, stop taking the quarters. And of course, Sylvester Stallone's character gets into a accident just shortly after that, and he's trying to come up with an excuse. He said, what did you tell the people down at the station? What happened? And let's just watch that for a second, because it's very revealing.
What'd you tell Lenny about the accident?
Chasing the speeder.
What?
Sheriff was chasing the speeder.
So, of course, even this, sort of everyday sheriff is in on this sort of, Freddie Heflin, or Sylvester Stallone's character, is not immune to this sort of feeling of, he didn't say, that's not true. I wasn't chasing a speeder. I was a little intoxicated and hit a deer. He's like, oh, okay. And I think it's really interesting, because when we talk about policing this country, and we talk about being one set of laws for police and one set of laws for the rest of us, I think it sort of tells you, or gives you a sense of how that culture develops, right, and how it becomes sort of calcified in policing. Yeah.
Now, one thing that I thought was also interesting, and this is when the plan that Superboy allegedly jumps off this bridge, when you mentioned how one of the officers ran to immediately plant a gun in order to make the Superboy's assailants look dangerous, right, and as if they deserved to be shot.
To die, yeah.
There was an EMT there, and the EMT stood up to the police officers and said, you're planting that gun, you can't do this. And the EMT does something amazing. Let's watch.
We got it!
Yo, what the fuck are you doing, man?
I found their piece.
Found that piece.
Oh, Jesus.
That wasn't in there.
What do you mean it wasn't? It's underneath the floor, man.
Bullshit, man. You can't do that. Shut the fuck up.
Do what? It was underneath the fucking floor, man.
Hey, fuck you! Hey! Fuck you!
Put it down! I told you not to do it like this!
Kiss my ass.
Now, when I saw this scene, I couldn't help but think about all the times that I read about EMTs being pressured. For example, in Colorado, EMTs have been pressured to administer ketamine to suspects, perhaps against their own better medical judgment. They've been influenced by police to do so. And there have been other instances where I know EMTs have been asked to turn their heads and not see what's going on.
Yeah.
What did that scene say to you?
Well, that scene said to me that, that's not a normal EMT because, I mean, it was, but it also, I think, demonstrated that there was a tension, existing tension. You had two African-American young men, you had an African-American EMT, he was very conscious of what was going on, and he wasn't going to stand for it, and I think he was very frustrated by what he saw as a corrupt police force, sticking up for itself. And I think that frustration boiled over pretty early, and I think it was a very interesting scene to say that this type of corruption affects the community. Like right away we see the community representing there saying, hey, what are you doing? And I think that's a very important scene because you're so in this insular cop land world, like I said, everything's upside down. But in this case, we saw the community pushing back.
So now we know for certain that Superboy did not jump off the bridge, and it is part of an elaborate cover-up being created by these cops. And this is where the crimes that these officers commit really begins to accelerate. And there's a scene with one of my favorite actors, Robert De Niro, and he's playing an internal affairs officer, an officer who is tasked with investigating the wrongdoings of other cops. There's an interesting scene where he approaches Freddie Heflin, the Sylvester Stallone character,
right,
and explains to him why they have to investigate.
That's why I'm here, Sheriff. Because you're on the inside. And besides the church traffic and the cats in the trees and all that other bullshit, okay? There isn't much here for you to do. But I look at you, Sheriff, and I see a man who's waiting for something to do. And here I am. Here I am, saying, Sheriff, I got something for you to do.
I love this scene because I think, it's where sort of the rubber meets the road, where Sylvester Stallone has to make this weird decision to actually, enforce the law. He has to betray law enforcement in some ways, is what Robert De Niro. And then Robert De Niro kind of says, you got nothing going on in your life. You might as well do something exceptional with it. Here I am. I think no other actor could pull that off. But I think what's extremely important about this is the fact that Sylvester Stallone's choice is, A, do I stick with my law enforcement friends, or B, do I betray them by actually investigating a crime, which has become, a citywide thing, right? Yeah, and so how do you feel about Robert De Niro's performance there?
Okay, first off, Robert De Niro's performance was, as usual, exceptional.
Yep.
But I think what was really interesting is the way that it was set up as if it was going to be a betrayal. If Freddie Heflin helps him investigate these cops who are committing a crime, it's somehow a betrayal. It's somehow a betrayal of their oath. It's somehow a betrayal of the Blue Brotherhood. And that's what I found really interesting, because I thought the task of a law enforcement officer is to enforce laws wherever they're broken and wherever that is found.
Well,
so I thought that was a really interesting conundrum.
That's a really great point. He says, their pools are all above ground. They don't wear silk shirts. I guess it's a crime to raise your family someplace nice. Right. That is so manipulative. That's perfect Copaganda.
So I think the way that the police officers in this movie perceive internal affairs is really interesting. There's a moment where the character, played by Harvey Keitel, Ray Donovan, says this.
So what brings you to our fair city? Checking up on us?
I heard it was a way of life out here. Thought I'd check it out for myself.
What are we, like the Amish now?
So I think the scene says a lot about how police do not like to have anyone looking over their shoulder.
And how difficult it is to look over their shoulders because you've got, veteran cops with a long history calling him a rat. Right. I mean, he's just doing his job, but, no one likes to be investigated, but all the interrelationship to the police is made clear in this movie. Mo Tillman knows Harvey Keitel's character from way back, shows you sort of how entangled they are and how difficult it is to have an agency investigate itself. I think it's pretty clear.
So one thing I think the movie got really on target here was the way the police were able to feed a narrative to the media, and the media swallowed it whole and gave it out to the public. Let's take a listen, and keep in mind, we know that Superboy is alive, we know these other officers are committing crimes, but listen to what the public is being fed.
It was the system that drove Murray Superboy Babbage off that bridge. Murray Babbage was a hero cop. He deserved a fair hearing, but he knew this would not happen, not in this city.
Activist Cyril Johns met the parents of the slain teens, calling for a human blockade on the bridge tomorrow.
A drunk cop jumps off a bridge that does not erase the murder of 2 black children.
Yeah, and I love the way in that they're all kind of sitting in the bar kind of chuckling, right? I mean, they've got this kid who supposedly jumped off a bridge, an entire investigation of the city, and they're all sitting in the bar like, it's kind of like, whoa, look what we did.
Right, they're in the bar, you know, they
hugging
have some...
kind of on top of each other.
They're literally celebrating while they've essentially fooled the entire city.
You bring a really good point. We don't notice any reporters driving out to Garrison, New Jersey, looking around for Superboy. You know, everyone kind of, the mainstream media kind of swallows the narrative. And that is a really important point. Because if one reporter kind of drives out to Garrison and said, is he really dead?
Right. If one reporter had shown up to that bar to interview any of the officers about him, they might have actually seen Superboy was alive.
But instead, as you point out, the narrative is a hero cop takes his life because he thinks the justice system is unfair to cops.
Right.
That's an extraordinary narrative.
And it's an amazing twist that the public was swallowing whole, except for a few community leaders that we see in the movie.
Yep, great point.
So I think there's a really important moment where the character Ray, played by Harvey Keitel, who's a union rep, essentially gets the entire investigation shut down with a single phone call. And Ray Liotta tries to explain to Sheriff Freddie why this is happening, why it was so easy for him to do it, and why it's going to be so difficult for him to do an investigation. And I think this is one of your favorite scenes.
Yeah, well, it's one of my favorite lines from the scene, because I think it sort of embodies many, many types of things. You want to watch? Let's watch it.
Yeah, let's watch.
I need your help. Trying to kill me.
Who?
Who? My friends tried to kill me. Ray Donlin tried to kill me. Shit. Right. Forget it.
Why don't you get Superboy off the bridge and bring him back here and kill him?
Ray had a plan. He got very fucked up.
I just like the way he says it.
I know, Ray Liotta's such a great actor.
He says, like, things got really fucked. Ray had a plan,
and it got really effed up.
Well, and the way he said he kind of pauses, you know, he goes, it got really, like a little bit of laugh.
And that little chuckle that comes out when he's saying it, it was just like, it was just perfect. Just, perfect.
Yeah, and I think it, you know, it shows the sort of the absurdity of this kind of thing, that Ray had conjured this plan. Like, did he ever think about what are you going to do with it?
What are you going to do if he supposedly jumped off the bridge and committed suicide? What are you going to do when he's alive?
Right, and which brings us a scene where not only have they committed the murder of 2 young men, not only have they covered up the murder, but then they try to murder Superboy.
Right.
Let's watch.
Sorry it came out this way, Murray.
It's not that bad, Jack.
Yeah, it is, Murray.
I mean, come on.
Right.
You're talking about multiple counts.
How many counts of murder? So there's a murder. There's a conspiracy to commit murder. There is planting evidence.
Right.
Then we have an attempted murder, an assault.
Right.
I mean, it's just mayhem. And I think actually I've actually caused mayhem. Actually, that might be a crime too.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's extraordinary when you think about it. If these guys had lawyers, they would be spending the rest of their life. I mean, the series of crimes they committed by the time they try to kill Superboy, and then they're going to just dump him in the river so that someone can find him. I mean, that's pretty ruthless.
So this brings me to one of my favorite scenes with Ray Liotta. He is having, an issue with the cops in the bar. He feels like they're not keeping him in the loop, that they're making these plans,
and that push him out.
And that they're going to try to push him out. And they essentially say to Ray Liotta's character, well, you do drugs, you steal evidence, and this is how Ray Liotta's character responds.
What is this, Omerta? Huh? Listen, if IA's gonna fucking hang me by the balls, it ain't gonna be over some fucking missing evidence.
Figsy, you've been a cop 12 years. 6 grams missing, it's not a White Sox violation, babe. Come on.
You bought that big old house. Maybe you're trying to get out from under.
Hey, Jack.
What the fuck's up your ass? You gonna tell me you're getting by without gravy, any of you?
So I thought that was really interesting because he says, hey, there's nobody here that's not getting by without some gravy.
You gonna tell me you're getting by without gravy, any of you? Listen to me, I was...
So think about
He
it.
didn't mean gravy.
No, he meant, you know, being
Yeah.
on the tape,
Right.
getting money.
Because they were talking about 6 ounces is not a White Sox. 6 ounces of cocaine, that's pretty expensive,
Right,
right? So-
and he's saying that all of you are getting some form of cash. All of you are
Right.
somehow
Taking
on the
it off
tape.
of suspects, selling drugs, whatever. I mean,
Right, it's amazing. And the thing
Right.
is that these officers, when they say it's gravy, that's a euphemism that I think helps keep some distance between the impact of their crime and the crime
Right.
itself. They don't have to admit to committing crimes because they're the good guys that chase criminals, right? Instead, they're like, we just get some gravy. We just take a little money off the top. We just take a little money from the bad guys. We're
Right.
not actually doing anything wrong.
Well,
And I
yeah.
think that euphemistic way of talking and thinking is really a point of psychology that's very, very specific and very, very, it has a strong imperative behind it.
well, he didn't say, is anyone getting by without stealing?
Right.
And the gravy sort of sounds like a tip or something, you know, something
Right.
that is...
Just a little on the top.
We saw this in Baltimore in police when they would, you know, regularly take all this overtime.
Right.
It was kind of like, we just deserve it. We don't have to work it. There were lots of people, we had the gun trace task force, where they literally would say, you know, easy money. They would joke about getting overtime while they're on vacation, but it was more, I think, entitlement. And I think that's what you see
That's
with
the imperative behind it.
what Ray Liotta is talking about. We're entitled to this because we're going into that horrible city, and when we go over there, we're entitled to take whatever we want, and it doesn't matter. So I think that's a great point, Taya.
Okay, so there's another great scene where Ray Liotta and Sheriff Freddie Heflin, Sylvester Stallone's character, are talking, and Stallone's character is basically saying, "Well, I think I'm going to have to do this. I think I'm going to have to investigate these crimes." And Ray Liotta's character gives him some advice.
But how does this apply to what you were saying?
It applies, Freddy! It's just as easy to tail a man walking in front of him. Now, you butt heads with these friends of ours, you're gonna come at them head on? They got lives, Freddy. Families. No. You move diagonal. You jag.
So, Stephen, you love this diagonal rule. Why don't you talk a little bit about what do you think this means?
Well, I think, first of all, I think it means that Ray Liotta does a lot of coke during the movie.
Oh my goodness. Whether it was Goodfellas or this movie, he plays someone on cocaine the best I've ever seen.
Makes one wonder. But
Right,
you know,
method
I
acting.
think what's interesting about this is that Ray Liotta is saying, you know, you can't confront this power. This power is so immense, and it kind of gives you a sense of how powerful cops can be when they're corrupt, right? Because there's no way to confront them head on.
Right.
You would think you could say, okay, they broke the law, we're going to go and arrest them. And he's like, no, Freddie, if you confront these people head on, these are cops. These are like the worst mob or the worst gangsters you're ever going to confront. And, you know, in our own town, we saw that with the gun trace task force, who was robbing residents and a group
Dealing
of...
drugs and stealing
While the
overtime.
Department of Justice was in town investigating the department. So I think what's important about it, you know, when you have a force like this, like policing or people with guns and badges who are going to say, you know, we're going to do what we want to do, what Ray Liotta is saying in his co-confused haze is, hey, you can't come at these people. You're going to have to find a way around this to be kind of sneaky and make this happen. And that is very illustrative of the power of a badge when it's corrupted. It's almost omnipotent, you know? It almost has like all power.
Okay, so I hate to do this, but we are going to end the review here so that we don't spoil the rest of the movie for you. And I hope everyone who's watching this is inspired to go rent my favorite movie, and I'm sure it's Steven's, Copland.
Yeah, and one thing I want to make sure is clear and sort of takeaway, we talk about how this movie is a metaphor for American policing as a whole. And I think what's important is that there is a underlying premise of the movie, which is that these guys got Copland, they're in Garrison, because the mob gave them loans, low-interest loans to buy houses, right, so that they let them run drugs. But what that really is talking about is a relationship between elites, economic elites, you know, sort of profligate capitalism, and policing, and how police sort of have this special relationship with, you know, the powerful, the rich, who they really police and who they not really police but really protect. And it affords them a certain social status and a certain amount of economic security that the people they police don't have. You know,
Pensions, lifetime health benefits.
Overtime, it's amazing. I mean,
the
we have
best.
so many cops in Baltimore making $100,000 a year that only have a high school education. You couldn't get a job like that anywhere else. And so I think, like, that's what makes this movie a different kind of cop movie, because it's really exposing the relationship. It's not hitting you over the head with it. It's saying, think about this. So these cops escape to a suburb. They all get houses. You know, they're really given a land of economic opportunity and utopia that cannot be afforded to the people they left behind in the Bronx, right? And this because they have a special relationship with the mob, which I think really is the economic elites of this country, you know, and because of that,
definitely call some of our uber capitalist members of a mob.
right, and like in a sense, also like an original sin, right? Because from that sin of not really being a part of the community, of being economically separate, right? They then commit a myriad of sins, right? They feel empowered to set the rules for themselves and break any law they want.
And I just want you to know that if you have a favorite cop movie, please be sure to leave it in the comments for us to discuss. And I might even post a list. I went through the movie and wrote down every single crime that I could find. I might post that as a little list. And if you see any crimes I missed, please let me know, because I kind of love geeking out over this movie. So please feel free to do so. So I wanted to thank you for joining us for our special end of the year PAR. We wanted to do something a little bit lighter for the holidays. And we also wanted to just say thank you to everyone that is in our PAR audience. We read your comments. We appreciate that you watch us, because we know that it means that you really care about fairness in your community. We know that because we've read your comments, we've read your thoughts, and we know that the reason why police accountability matters so much to you is because you care.
And you want to make a better community.
Absolutely.
And that's why we do it. We want to do it because, you know, better policing means a better community. And you can't give power to someone without holding them accountable. And that's why we do what we do. And we appreciate the fact that you watch our show, because it gives us the ability to report on this. Yes. So it's very important. Now, Taya, do I have to go outside?
You will.
Okay.
You will have to go outside. But before we do, I just wanted to say, if you have any evidence of police misconduct or brutality, please feel free to email it to us privately at par@therealnews.com. Of course, you can always reach out to us on Facebook and Twitter at Police Accountability Report. On Twitter, it's at Eyes on Police. On Instagram, it's Police Accountability Report. And of course, you can always message me directly at Tejas Baltimore on Facebook and Twitter. And please do like and comment on this video. You know I read your comments and appreciate them. And I'll try to answer your questions if I can. I am Taya Graham.
I'm Stephen Janis.
And we are the Police Accountability Report. Please be safe out there and have a great holiday.